In the shadow of modern Cairo, the ruins of ancient Egypt lay dormant, a testament to a civilization long past. Tourists and scholars alike flocked to these relics, but only a few knew the deeper secrets hidden beneath the sands. Among them was Dr. Amelia Richards, a renowned Egyptologist obsessed with uncovering the mysteries of the pharaohs. Dr. Richards had spent years studying the lesser-known deity, Anubis, the god of mummification and the afterlife. Her research suggested that Anubis held a power far greater than any of the other gods. Intrigued by her findings, she organized an expedition to explore a newly discovered tomb deep within the desert. This tomb was rumored to be dedicated to Anubis himself. With her team, Dr. Richards ventured into the desert, the scorching sun beating down on them. After days of travel, they reached the entrance to the tomb, partially buried under centuries of sand. As they descended into the darkness, the air grew cooler, and an eerie silence enveloped them. The tomb was vast, filled with hieroglyphs and statues of Anubis in his jackal-headed form. The deeper they went, the more Dr. Richards felt a strange sense of foreboding. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum, where a massive sarcophagus lay. Intricate carvings depicted Anubis in various forms, guiding souls through the afterlife. Driven by her thirst for knowledge, Dr. Richards carefully opened the sarcophagus. Inside was a pristine statue of Anubis, made of black granite and inlaid with gold. The eyes of the statue seemed to glint in the dim light, almost alive. As she reached out to touch it, a sudden tremor shook the tomb, and the air grew thick with a palpable energy. Unbeknownst to the team, their actions had awakened Anubis from his millennia-long slumber. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences began to plague Cairo. Reports of a shadowy figure with the head of a jackal spread like wildfire. People claimed to see glowing eyes in the dark and heard whispers of an ancient curse. Dr. Richards, now back in Cairo, was haunted by nightmares. In her dreams, Anubis appeared, vowing vengeance for the downfall of the Egyptian empire. He spoke of restoring Egypt to its former glory, and anyone who stood in his way would face his wrath. She woke each night drenched in sweat, the image of those glowing eyes burned into her mind. One evening, as Dr. Richards was studying the artifacts they had recovered, the lights in her apartment flickered. The temperature dropped, and a sense of dread filled the room. She turned to see the figure of Anubis standing in the doorway, his eyes glowing with an unearthly light. "You have disturbed my rest," he said, his voice a low growl. "For this, you must pay." Before she could react, Anubis vanished, leaving her trembling with fear. She knew she had to warn the others, but it was already too late. One by one, her team members began to disappear. Their bodies were found days later, mummified and posed in grotesque parodies of ancient rituals. The city of Cairo was gripped by fear as more people fell victim to the vengeful deity. Anubis moved through the city like a shadow, unseen but always felt. He targeted those he deemed responsible for the empire's downfall, corrupt politicians, greedy businessmen, and even those who desecrated the ancient tombs for profit. Dr. Richards, racked with guilt, sought the help of an old colleague, Professor Hassan, an expert in ancient Egyptian magic. Together, they delved into ancient texts, searching for a way to stop Anubis. They discovered a ritual that could potentially banish the god back to the underworld, but it required a great sacrifice. Determined to make amends, Dr. Richards and Professor Hassan prepared for the ritual. They gathered the necessary ingredients and made their way to the heart of the city, where the ancient temple of Anubis once stood. The temple was now in ruins, a forgotten relic amidst the modern cityscape. As they began the ritual, the air grew thick with tension. Anubis appeared before them, his eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot stop me," he snarled. "I will have my revenge." Dr. Richards stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "We seek to restore the balance, to honor the ancient ways," she said. "Please, let us atone for our mistakes." Anubis hesitated, his gaze piercing her soul. For a moment, it seemed he might relent, but then his expression hardened. "There can be no forgiveness," he declared. "Only retribution." With a wave of his hand, Anubis summoned a horde of spectral jackals. They lunged at Dr. Richards and Professor Hassan, their snarls echoing through the night. The two scholars fought valiantly, but they were no match for the god's wrath. In a final act of desperation, Dr. Richards reached for the ancient amulet they had discovered in the tomb. She held it aloft, chanting the words of the ritual. The amulet glowed with a blinding light, and Anubis howled in fury. The light enveloped him, pulling him back into the depths of the underworld. As the light faded, the spectral jackals vanished, and the city fell silent. Dr. Richards collapsed, her body weakened by the ordeal. Professor Hassan knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face. "We did it," he whispered. "We stopped him." But their victory was short-lived. In the days that followed, reports of strange occurrences began to surface once more. Shadows moved in the night, whispers filled the air, and the scent of decay lingered in the streets. It became clear that Anubis was not truly defeated, only momentarily subdued. Dr. Richards, now a shadow of her former self, knew that the battle was far from over. Anubis would return, and when he did, the world would once again face his wrath. She vowed to continue her research, to find a way to permanently banish the vengeful god. Years passed, and Dr. Richards became a recluse, dedicated to her studies. She discovered ancient texts that spoke of a powerful artifact hidden deep within the Sahara Desert, a relic that could potentially imprison Anubis for eternity. With renewed determination, she set out on one final expedition, hoping to end the cycle of vengeance once and for all. As she ventured into the heart of the desert, she could feel the presence of Anubis growing stronger. The wind howled like the cries of the damned, and the sand shifted beneath her feet. She knew that this journey would be her last, but she was prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to save the world from the wrath of the god of the afterlife. Dr. Amelia Richards, once a renowned Egyptologist, became a legend herself. Her tale was whispered among scholars and adventurers, a reminder of the power and fury of the ancient gods. And though Anubis's vengeance was never fully quenched, her courage and determination continued to inspire those who sought to uncover the secrets of the past and protect the future from its darkest shadows.